According to surveys, 1 in 4 Americans now own Bitcoin. And this bull run, there's a lot of hype on how high the price of Bitcoin can go. We've seen the SEC approve exchange traded funds giving Wall Street easy access to purchasing Bitcoin. We're seeing players like BlackRock, who manages about $10 trillion worth of assets, and other players like Fidelity buy hundreds of millions of dollars worth of Bitcoin in a single day repeatedly this year in 2024. And lately we've seen prices for Bitcoin trading between 60 and 70,000 per Bitcoin. But how high will it go? Some are calling for 500,000 per Bitcoin this cycle. And we're even seeing experts like Raoul Pal, who's got an extensive background in financial markets, calling for a Bitcoin price as high as $1 million by 2025. In this video, I'm going to make a case for why I think they're all wrong. I'm going to show you some data, and I'm going to give you my projections for where I think the price of Bitcoin is headed and what I'm doing this cycle to maximize my profits. So hopping over to CoinGecko, if we take a look at Bitcoin, again, currently it's trading between $60,000 and $70,000 more recently in this early phase of the bull market. And when you look to the past and you see how in the 2017, 2018 cycle, we saw Bitcoin reach up to 18K. And then in the last bull run, we saw it top out at about 70K. You see these big explosive moves cycle to cycle. And so at first glance, you could think, why not? Why can't Bitcoin hit 500K or even $1 million per token? And maybe it will, but really it's not just up to what happens with Bitcoin. You have to zoom out and you actually have to look at the entire crypto market as a whole, right? So if you look at cryptocurrency by its total market cap, what you will see is that currently we've got a market cap, according to CoinGecko, of about $2.5 trillion. And so one thing to keep in mind is that in order for Bitcoin to grow in value, there has to be interest in the whole market, right? And currently Bitcoin makes up about half of the crypto market. So really we want to zoom out and look at crypto as a whole and say, how much growth can we expect in each cycle, right? And it's kind of hard to do on CoinGecko here. So I'm going to hop over to TradingView. And if we look at the total crypto market cap, we can actually measure to the peak of 2018 to the peak of 2021, we saw a growth of about 300%, right? So we had a 300% growth in the crypto market. And so the big question is, how high can the market grow this cycle? So normally I would not expect another move up as big as the previous one, right? So in this case, I would be expecting less than a 300% growth in the overall market. But because this cycle will be unlike any other cycle, right? We've got new big players with the potential to buy crypto and push price up like we've never seen before. To be conservative, I'm going to take the approach of looking at the total market cap with the expectation that we get the same amount of growth potentially in this upcoming cycle here, right? To its peak. So meaning if we look at the peak of the previous cycle, which ended in 2021, 2022, right, to where the peak can potentially go this upcoming bull run, I'm going to forecast a 300% growth in the overall crypto market. So if we kind of stretch out this chart here to kind of see what that would look like, right, we're going to have to zoom this out here, right? And if we try to measure a 300% growth from the peak of the last cycle up, right, if we go up 300%, that brings us to about a $12 trillion market cap, right? So we're currently sitting at about a $2.5 trillion market cap. And under this theory here, we could potentially see a $12 trillion market cap for crypto at the peak of this upcoming bull, right? And if you wanted to be more conservative, you might say that a good estimate could be between 10 trillion and 12 trillion. Now, the reason why that's important is you can kind of reverse engineer pricing expectations to where you think the overall market can go, right? And so if we just took a calculator, right, and we took 12 trillion divided by 3 trillion, which is essentially the peak of the last cycle, right? That's a 4x. So we're potentially looking at a 4x increase in the market cap this bull run. And going back to our price of Bitcoin, we reached about $70,000 at the peak of the last cycle, right? So if we take our calculator out again and we take 70,000 and we multiply it by 4, that brings us to a potential price if Bitcoin maintains as dominant in the market as it is now, right? If it keeps 50% of the crypto market, give or take, just like it does now. And it stays number one, like the top tier crypto asset that anyone can be holding, right? That brings us to an estimated value of about $280,000 per Bitcoin. And so obviously that's very different than a 500K or even $1 million Bitcoin, right? That is ways apart. And so if you were playing this more conservatively, that could be a target that you have in mind as the potential peak this cycle, right? And so if this plays out this way, and a lot of people are actually hoping for that 500K or $1 million Bitcoin, they may be left holding the bag while the market dumps on them unexpectedly, right? Because they were waiting for that bigger number that just maybe wasn't that realistic in the first place. And so that's my personal prediction for where I think Bitcoin will be at the peak of the market. And so now let's look at my plan for profit taking. There's actually a systematic approach to profit taking that I'm going to be doing this cycle. And we're going to pull up TradingView again so you can see what that looks like. And so we're back into TradingView now, and I pulled up the price of Bitcoin against the dollar, and we're looking at this from a weekly viewpoint because we want to look at this as a long-term investor. So I'm making sure I set my chart to weekly, right? And then the next thing I'm going to do here, the trick to this profit-taking strategy is to use an indicator called the Relative Strength Index, right? So you can click on indicators and you can search for something called RSI or Relative Strength Index. And when you click on it, it will add it to your chart down here. And what this is, it's a measure of how overbought or oversold something is in the market, right? And so the way that's represented on this indicator here is you have this shaded colored area here, right? If I kind of stretch this out, you'll see that there's a colored area. This is kind of a neutral territory zone, right? And as something gets really overbought, it's really heated, there's lots of buying happening, price is pumping up, you'll see these lines go above that neutral territory, right? They live above it when something is getting overbought, right? And then conversely, when something is being sold off a lot, there's a lot of selling happening in the market, it's starting to cool off. You can see here as Bitcoin was losing its all-time high in the last cycle down to almost the lows of the bear market. We can see the RSIs, right? The RSI on the weekly view here pretty much bottomed out below the neutral zone again, right? And so the RSI is a pretty cool tool that you can use as a long-term investor to look at your kind of timing for getting into the market. And so what's interesting is if we look at what happened in the last bull run, right? And we compare it to the bull run before that. So we're looking at the 2018 to the 2022 move here, right? What we can see is that in 2018, we had Bitcoin hit almost 19, 20 or 20K just about, right? And so as the price revisited that high, right, of that previous high of 19, 20K, right before it just ripped up, right before the bull run really took off aggressively. If we look at the RSI and kind of match it against the price here, you can see that the RSI was well above neutral, right? It was just living above this buying frenzy zone, and it just the price of Bitcoin as crypto is getting exciting, it pumped from 20K all the way as high as 65, 70K. And so what's really interesting is if you kind of fast forward to today, we're almost repeating history, right? We can see here, if we look at the previous high, we were about 70K, and we've had our bear market, we've been cooled off, and then more recently, we're revisiting previous highs, right? We're floating in that 60 to 70K territory, much like we were in the past, right? We had a bear market in 2019 or so, and then eventually Bitcoin bobbed up and down, revisited its previous highs, and then it just took off again, right? And so if you look at what happened with the RSI and you consider what your forecast is, right? We looked at the total market cap before potential, and we saw that potentially we have a 4x in market cap, right? The previous market cap for crypto at the peak of the last bull run where Bitcoin hit 70K was about $3 trillion, right? And so if we're going to 4x from there and we're targeting a price of about 280K for Bitcoin, we want to have a systematic way to take profit on the way up. And so one thing I'm going to be doing is looking at this RSI on a weekly view, right? And if we, again, look at the past and we take this measuring tool here and we just kind of measure from peak to peak, right? Again, in the case of Bitcoin, at least how I'm showing it here, we had about a 250 or so % increase in price And looking at how the cycle played out, right? Every time we kind of had a leg up before we cooled off, if we stretch this out, we can see we had a run up of about 100%, right? Once we revisited that all-time high, we saw a 100% move up, and then we kind of cooled off for a few weeks, and then we had another 100% run up, right? From that next stop to that first top here, we had actually about a 60% move up. And if you watch those RSIs, right, those were perfect times to be taking profit before price started to cool off, right? Once the RSIs kind of crossed back into this neutral territory here, and there is kind of like a latency factor to it, right? Once they head down, prices already kind of moved down aggressively. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking profit systematically on the way up, right? And so if I take that approach and I forecast it out, right? If I zoom out here to try to find my $280,000 target for Bitcoin, just to give you a perspective here, it looks pretty wild, right? When you look at, we're talking about a move all the way up to this territory here. It kind of dwarfs the last cycle, right? Each bull run kind of dwarfs the cycle before it. And so even just getting to 280, while at first glance it may seem significantly lower than these 500K or $1 million targets for Bitcoin, when you look at it this way, it doesn't seem so minuscule, right? And perhaps I could argue that shooting for a $1 million Bitcoin this cycle, might in fact be unrealistic, right? This may not be realistic to go to 1 million this cycle. And so let's just delete this off the screen here for a second and reset what we're looking at. Okay, so we've got this reset a little bit here. So again, if we take our measuring stick out, right, and we're planning on moves, like even without price hitting these levels yet, if I just kind of earmark in my mind that when we get to 100% above the all-time high, right, that puts us at about 125K. Another 50% move up from 125 would put us at about 190K, right? So that's another level, right? So right away, I've got potentially these two targets here where we could be seeing the RSIs heat up and indicate that it could be a good time to start layering out, right? And that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm not going to be trying to perfectly time the top, because most people are not going to be able to do that, right? Chances are you're not going to be the one to perfectly time the top, right? And so what most people do is they end up missing it entirely, and they don't know how to sell. They don't have a system for selling, and they just kind of ride it all the way back down. And who would want to do that, right? The worst thing you want to do is ride the market all the way back down. And so maybe, selling off 25% of my holdings at that first level, another 25% of my holdings at that next level, and then doing my best to try to time the top, as close. Maybe we'll hit 280. I hope we do. I hope we go higher. But either way, I'm going to have a plan for taking profit up, and perhaps even as things cool off, if this market plays out this way, where we do see a top closest to $280,000 per Bitcoin, I want to be selling on the way up and a little bit on the way down, right? And just be out of the market and let the market cool off and actually have profit. Most people don't know how to sell, and they have nothing to show for it at the end of a market cycle. Now, obviously, you shouldn't take any of this as financial advice. What I wanted to do in this video was show you my strategy for how I'm taking profits, not only with Bitcoin, but with all my crypto holdings in this upcoming bull run. And while it may have been a little bit more conservative and perhaps a little contrarian to the other crypto bulls out there, make no mistake, I'm still very bullish and very optimistic on how this market is going to play out. And I personally believe that the key to prospering in this upcoming bull run is for you to have a plan, right? And not just any plan, but have a plan that aligns with you and your investor profile. If you're more conservative, then you want to have a plan that aligns with how you invest, right? Don't believe all the hype. And then when the market gets scared, don't just fall into the fear-mongering trap, because we see both in every market cycle, and people get caught up in the emotions. They don't stick to a plan, and that's how they end up not winning big, right? And so I hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Dan Ryder. I'm the founder of Prime DeFi, and I will see you in the next video.